no appreciable progress appears to have been made. There's nothing concrete here that was accomplished on this call. President Trump says that he believes it went well, but the last time he interacted with Putin, he said he suspected that he was just tapping him along.
Yes.
And it's hard to avoid the impression that is, again, what is happening.
Molly, let me just throw this in real time because I haven't read it yet. I'm just going to read it now. This is from Trump, who's posted. I believe it completed my 2-hour call with Vladimir Putin of Russia. He says, I believe it went very well. It's a curious thing to say about a phone call you've just had. I believe it went well, but that's what he says. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war, he says. The conditions for that will be negotiated between the two parties, as it can only be, because they know the details of a negotiation that nobody else will be aware of. The tone and spirit of the conversation were excellent. If it wasn't, says Trump in this posting, I would say so now rather than later. There's more, which I may well come back to. But let me just add this, because this is an account from the Putin side. It went out in a statement earlier on. And the Putin side version, it quotes Putin saying, we've agreed with the president of the US that Russia will propose and is ready to work with the Ukrainian side on a memorandum on a possible future peace accord, defining a number of positions such as, for example, the principles of settlement, the timing of possible peace agreement. So far, so really rather vague. And then he says, as part of this work, the two countries will have to define a possible ceasefire. So, that work then moved off into the future. And here's a direct quote from President Putin. I would like to note that, on the whole, Russia's position is clear. The main thing for us is this seems pretty crucial, worth noting, is to eliminate the root causes of this crisis. We just need to determine the most effective ways to move towards peace. So that is an account from both sides. Molly, your thoughts on all of that? Just that last point there, out of the mouth of Putin. Whatever else happens, they need to address the root causes of the war. The root causes of the war, in the mouth and the mind of Vladimir Putin, are things that were utterly, totally unacceptable to Ukraine and to the friends of Ukraine. He won't accept the legitimacy of the Ukraine government. He wants to retain and hold sovereignty over the area that he now occupies, or his forces now occupy. He wants Ukraine's ability and freedom to rearm for its future defence to be severely constrained. And there are others too, Molly. I don't know, what do you think? This does not look to me in itself to be a recipe for, or a clear route to progress. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the takeaway from all of this is that no appreciable progress appears to have been made. There's nothing concrete here that was accomplished on this call. President Trump says that he believes it went well, but the last time he interacted with Putin, he said he suspected that he was just tapping him along.
Yes.
And it's hard to avoid the impression that is, again, what is happening, because, they had a very lengty conversation. But all that came of it was an agreement to continue to talk, to get to an agreement, to continue to talk, to get to an agreement, to potentially have a ceasefire or eventually some kind of peace agreement. But again, it doesn't look like there's real progress that is being made in these talks. And one does wonder whether Trump is again going to become frustrated with this dynamic, given that any kind of ceasefire still appears to be pretty far off in the future.
If he's going to get frustrated and do something about it, he's taking his time about getting frustrated enough to do something about it. What's your thoughts, Ian?
Well, I can only agree, really. And from the readout, I would be very happy if I was Putin at this. Where is the pressure that being applied? Where is the downside for Russia if they don't accelerate and move towards peace talks? So, nothing much for Ukrainian people who at the moment are still facing daily attacks from Russian bombs and missiles.
What are you thinking, Anna?
I suspect that this readout, obviously so far we've had the Kremlin version and the Trump tweet, but I suspect that we're not being told what was actually the main subject of the call. I think there's going to be a pivot relatively soon towards some sort of US-Russia economic deal or closer cooperation, where Trump essentially washes his hands of the Ukraine attempts and says, just says, it's either too complicated or it's Russia's sphere of influence, and therefore we're going to focus on trying to get some economic deals, which he has spoken about before. But, I just can't believe that it was a 2-hour call of Putin just repeating his lines. That wouldn't have happened. There was something else there.
Yeah. Molly, on this question of normalizing relations between Moscow and Washington, we heard earlier in the day from Sergei Markov, who's a former advisor to Vladimir Putin. And when he speaks, you sense with the authority of what's going on inside the Kremlin. He's very well plugged in. And in his list of his wish list for Putin, one of them was the normalization of economic ties with America, irrespective of what may be going on in Ukraine. And you can easily see that's exactly what Russia wants. And we know, because we've seen all the evidence that we need to, that inside the Trump administration, they are keen to normalize relations as soon as possible. But the point here, Molly, I want to get your thought on this before we just take a momentary break, is it would be surely very, very, very difficult for Donald Trump to move towards normalization, to significantly relax sanctions at all until there is concrete progress towards a ceasefire. That seems to be pretty clear. Is that your view?
That is definitely my view as well. I did think it was interesting that, the second part of that Trump post on Truth Social that you were reading is all about the potential for what he claims is, economic flourishing for both Russia and Ukraine.
Yes.
When and if some kind of agreement is reached. This is, of course, the framework through which Trump sees most world affairs is the framework of economics and business. And, the question, I think, for the Russian side has always been, is that foremost in Putin's mind, or is he primarily concerned with other factors? Is he actually going to be motivated enough by that? So I read that post from Trump on Truth Social as him, trying to balance the sort of the stick of sanctions with the potential carrot of some kind of economic reward. But it's quite vague, almost to the point of being subtle. And it clearly communicates that that there were no kind of guarantees offered, just this vague idea that, good things could happen if we were to get to a better place.
Yeah, a memorandum on a possible future peace accord defining a number of positions such as the principles of settlement, the timing of a possible peace agreement. That's what's being offered. There's nothing concrete here or anything remotely concrete in this as far as the Putin account of what's going on. There is this in the Trump account. The Vatican, says President Trump, as represented by the Pope, has stated it will be very interested in hosting the negotiations. Let the process begin. Well, again, if the invitation is given to the Vatican, please hold negotiations, it's hardly the Vatican saying anything other than we'd be willing to do that. Anyway, more to talk about, much more to talk about here on Pino and Friends with Molly Ball from the Wall Street Journal. Molly, where do you see this developing on your side of the ocean? Lindsey Graham, the senior Republican senator, seems to be quite keen to get on with getting some sanctions into place through Congress rather than through the mechanism of the administration. And he's been talking, hasn't he, about very, very tough sanctions. Is there a future in that plan from where you are?
I think that's one possibility. I mean, another possibility that we're sort of seeing implicit in what Trump is saying today is and something that, Secretary of State Rubio has also been talking about, is for the U.S. to simply pull back from these talks.
Right.
He seems to be saying he wants Russia and Ukraine to speak directly. Would the U.S. be willing to put more pressure on that by applying sanctions? It's really not clear at this moment. I think there's a lot of conflicting voices within the administration on that point. I think Senator Graham's proposal is one piece of that I don't know, frankly, what the prospects are for that going through Congress, which has a lot on its mind right now, dealing with the big tax bill that Trump is pushing. And that's the primary focus on Capitol Hill right now. But, I think one thing you can read from Trump's tweet is him sort of almost washing his hands of this and saying, we want the Russians and the Ukrainians to talk about this directly. Yeah. Potentially, we want the Vatican to be a go-between. Yeah. But it seems to be a way of saying, the U.S. might take a back seat and not be the direct intermediary any longer.
And for the administration to take a back seat, to just disengage from any talks at this point without coming up with tougher sanctions, which are in the power of the administration, that would just be giving Putin so much of what he wants, wouldn't it? I mean, that would just tilt the balance further. The European leaders, yes, they've got it in their power to impose tougher sanctions, but without America doing the same sort of thing, arm in arm, it just leaves Putin so much better off, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, the question we've been asking from the beginning in this is to what extent Trump is willing to put pressure on Putin, and I think that is still an unanswered question. We've seen him go from seeming to only put pressure on the Ukrainians to now inching back towards, at least seeming to recognize that, the Russians need to have some agency here. But whether and if he will really seek to put pressure on Russia has been the question, I think, since the beginning of the administration. And it's one we're still waiting to have answered.
All right, Molly, it's really great to talk to you as always. Do come back and talk to us again very soon. Molly Ball from the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you.